manuscript is written in a way that nobody else could read it suggests that it is preserving knowledge that someone wanted to keep secret.
Imagine having a book in front of you that scholars from around the world have been trying to understand for more than 100 years. But no one has been able to say for sure what even a single line means. Old codebreakers also tried to crack this book. Then came AI. Computers found patterns in its words that looked like they belonged to a real language. After that, it was claimed that perhaps the language was Hebrew. Not only that, a claim even came forward that the meaning of one line of the book had been figured out. So, then the question is, if AI had understood it, why is the Voynich Manuscript still a mystery today? And the story doesn't end here. The very next year, a researcher from another university claimed that they had cracked the code of the entire book in just 2 weeks. But what happened to this claim only made the mystery even deeper. So does this book really contain a lost language? Or is the entire book just an extremely clever hoax? And the strangest part, scientists found some evidence that both sides, the people who believe it is a real language and those who believe it is fake, can use to support their arguments. So what exactly is written in this book that no one has been able to prove and read until today? To find out, stay with us until the end of the video. Before we move ahead in the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can watch such videos first. The book we are talking about is called the Voynich Manuscript. Today, this book is safely kept at Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library in America, and it is registered under the name MS408. At first glance, it doesn't look like an ordinary old book. It has around 240 pages made from a special type of parchment made from animal skin, known as vellum. But the real mystery is even more interesting than the age of these pages. Something has been handwritten on them in a script that no one has been able to read with certainty until today. And it's not just that the letters look strange. The real problem is that no one has been able to prove what these words actually mean. As soon as you open its pages, the mystery only gets bigger. Some pages contain drawings of plants that don't match any known species. Some have charts that look like stars and planets, while others show zodiac signs. On some pages, there are naked women sitting in pools, connected by strange tubes. Apart from this, there are circular rosettes, jar-like objects, and long texts that some people believe could be old remedies or recipes. Looking at these drawings, historians have divided the book into 6 different sections. But one thing still remains the same. The pictures can give us an idea of what each section might be about, but no one knows what is actually written in it. But first, it was important to find out how old this book really is. By now, it had become clear that the Voynich Manuscript was not an ordinary book. But one big question was still left. How old is this book, after all? To find this out, in 2009, scientists from Arizona University used a scientific method called radiocarbon dating. For this, they took 4 different samples of the book's vellum and tested them. The results of the test were quite interesting. With around 95% certainty, scientists said that the vellum on which this book was written dates back to somewhere between 1404 and 1438. That means these pages are more than 600 years old. In other words, the vellum of the Voynich Manuscript belongs to the later period of medieval Europe. But there is one small thing that is very important to understand here. This test only told us the age of the vellum. It does not prove 100% that the ink and the entire writing on it are also from the same time. It is possible that very old vellum was used later, and this small point was going to become extremely important in this whole story. Because if someone says that this book was actually created later, they would have an argument based on exactly this point. But for now, one question had become even bigger. If these pages really date back to the 1400s, then what language is actually written on them? Now that the age of the Voynich manuscript had been estimated, the next question was, how could the language written inside it be identified? In January 2018, natural language processing expert Greg Kondrak from the University of Alberta and his graduate student Bradley Hauer took a different approach to solve this mystery. They did not try to directly translate the book. First, they tried to find out which language its writing was most similar to. For this, they created an algorithm that used samples from translations of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in around 400 different languages. The computer looked at the patterns of words and letters used in these languages, and then compared them with the writing of the Voynich manuscript. At first, the researchers thought that the book might have been written in Arabic, but when the algorithm did its work, the result was completely different from what they expected. The computer came up with Hebrew as the most likely language, but the story did not end there. After this, both researchers worked on another idea. They believed that perhaps the order of the letters in the words used in the manuscript had been changed. In other words, the words could be mixed-up versions of real words. They tried to explain this through the theory of alphagrams, which looks somewhat similar to an anagram. Now the question was, if this method was correct, could it be used to read an actual sentence from the manuscript? And this is where that sentence appeared, which for a few days made the whole world believe that the Voynich manuscript had finally been read. Now the next step for the researchers was, if the computer was pointing toward Hebrew, could this theory actually help them understand any real sentence from the manuscript? For this, they tried their alphagram method on a sentence found at the beginning of the manuscript. After arranging the letters of the words into a possible order, they used Google Translate to understand its meaning. The meaning that came out was explained roughly like this. He made recommendations to the priest, the owner of the house, me, and other people. Greg Kondrak considered this result quite important. He said that the sentence was grammatically correct and that it could make some sense. In other words, for the first time, it seemed like there might be a way to understand at least some part of this centuries-old mysterious book. And then the news started spreading quickly. Fox News presented it in a way that made it seem as if the Voynich manuscript had finally been decoded. Canadian press also reported the discovery. Global News interviewed Greg Kondrak. For a few days, it felt like one of history's most difficult mysteries had finally been solved by AI. But here, one thing is very important. This was a claim, not a completely proven translation. Because when other experts started looking closely at this sentence, the story began to change. The problem was not just that the computer had identified Hebrew as the most likely language. The real question was about the final step, how the meaning of these mixed-up Hebrew words had actually been figured out. But as soon as other experts started examining this claim more closely, the story began to look a little different. Medieval scholars and researchers who had been working on the Voynich manuscript for a long time started raising questions. This included medieval specialist Damian Fleming from Indiana University, Purdue University, Fort Wayne. Interestingly, his main objection was not to the part where the computer identified Hebrew as the most likely language based on statistical patterns. The real question was, how was the meaning of the words figured out after that? The researchers had used Google Translate for this. But Google Translate is designed to understand modern Hebrew language. On the other hand, the text being discussed could be around 600 years old. On top of that, the researchers' theory was that the letters in the words were not in their correct places. So the critics' question was very simple. If this really is Old Hebrew, then why wasn't an expert in ancient or medieval Hebrew consulted to figure out its meaning? Greg Kondrak himself also admitted that experts would be needed to understand the full meaning of the manuscript and confirm it. And in the world of the Voynich manuscript, this was not a new problem. Even before this, many people had claimed that they had solved the mystery. But when other researchers tried to reproduce those results, they could not make them work. Slowly, these big claims disappeared into the pages of history. If you like such deep and mysterious stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Because this pattern was not repeated just once in the story of the Voynich Manuscript. But the story was not just about the AI claim. Exactly 1 year later, in 2019, another such claim came forward that once again grabbed the world's attention toward the Voynich Manuscript. In May 2019, the University of Bristol released a press release. In it, researcher Dr. Gerard Cheshire was quoted as saying that he had cracked the code of the Voynich Manuscript in just 2 weeks. The claim itself was quite big. For centuries, experts around the world had been unable to read this book, and now it was being said that its mystery had been understood in just 2 weeks. According to Cheshire, the manuscript was written in a language that he called proto-romance. According to him, it was an early Romance language from that period, connected to the old spoken Latin from which languages like Italian and Spanish later developed. His claim was not limited to identifying the language. He said that the manuscript contained information about women's health, herbal treatments, and medicinal or therapeutic baths. After this claim, the news spread very quickly. From CNN to the BBC, several major news outlets reported the discovery. Once again, it started to feel like perhaps the mystery of the Voynich Manuscript had finally been solved. But just like last time, the story did not remain simple for very long. This time, the criticism was not limited to questions from a few researchers. The University of Bristol itself had to step back from its own announcement. But as soon as Gerard Cheshire's claim came forward, other experts once again started examining it closely. Lisa Fagan Davis, the executive director of the Medieval Academy of America, raised serious questions about the proto-romance theory. She said that she had already tried to reproduce Cheshire's method, but when the method was applied consistently, it did not work properly. The biggest problem was that this method allowed changes to be made to words and letters in ways that could produce the desired result. In other words, if you already believe that a word should have a particular meaning, you could change the letters according to your needs and create a path toward that meaning. And this is a major problem for any decoding method, because if the rules do not work the same way everywhere, it becomes difficult to prove whether you have actually discovered a language or simply fitted the words according to your own assumptions. The matter became serious enough that the University of Bristol removed that article from its website within about a day. The university said that questions had been raised about the validity of the research. Now the picture was becoming clearer. In 2018, a major claim came through AI, but questions were raised about the translation. In 2019, the proto-romance claim came forward, and that also failed to stand up to examination. So then, what was the real problem? Were researchers trying to read this book using the wrong methods? Or perhaps we are trying to read a book in which there is no real language to read at all? So far, we have seen two major claims. In one, AI pointed toward Hebrew, and in the other, it was claimed to be a proto-romance language. But if neither of them was correct, could there be a third possibility? In 2004, researcher Gordon Rugg looked at this question from a different point of view. He suggested that perhaps the words written in the Voynich Manuscript were not words from any real language at all. Maybe they were created in a specific way. For this, he explained a method using an old tool called a cardan grill. In simple language, it is a piece of cardboard with small holes in it. It can be placed over a table containing different parts of words, such as a prefix, the middle part or stem, and the ending part or suffix. Now, by placing this grill in different positions, different pieces can be joined together to create new words. The interesting thing is that this method can create words that look and behave statistically like they belong to a real language, but actually have no meaning at all. Rugg also looked at the length of the words in the Voynich Manuscript. He felt that there was a strange kind of consistency in the length of these words, something that is not so easily seen in normal human languages. If his idea was correct, it could mean that the entire book was a hoax created in a very clever way. But here, too, there was a major problem. The Cardan grill is associated with Girolamo Cardano around 1550, while the vellum of the Voynich manuscript had already been dated to roughly a century earlier. But there was a major problem with Gordon Rugg's theory, the timeline. As we saw, the documented use of the Cardan grill is generally associated with Girolamo Cardano around 1550. On the other hand, radiocarbon dating of the Voynich manuscript's vellum places it between around 1404 and 1438. That means there is a gap of more than 100 years between the two. Now, if we accept Rugg's theory, the question is simple. If a method like the Cardan grill was used to create the words in the manuscript, where did such a mechanism come from in the 1400s? One possible answer given from Rugg's side was that perhaps an older version of the Cardan grill already existed, but no record of it survived in history. Another possibility could be that the manuscript's vellum was from the 1400s, but the writing was done much later, and this point is very important. Because having old vellum and having writing on it from the same time are not the same thing. Someone could have used old vellum at a later date, but even then, this timeline gap remains a major problem for the hoax theory, because so far, there is no solid evidence that clearly shows that this kind of word generation method existed in the 1400s. And this is where another strange thing appears in the story. If these are just random and fake words, then why do they behave like a real language? Now the story gets a little more strange. Because if the words written in the Voynich manuscript were just randomly created, then why do they show so much regularity? To understand this, researchers use a mathematical concept called information entropy. The name sounds a little difficult, but let's understand it in a simple way. If you keep writing completely random letters, it would be difficult to guess what the next letter will be. That means predictability would be low and entropy would be high. But human languages do not work like that. Some letters appear again and again, some letters are used more often together, and certain patterns can also be seen at the beginning, middle, and end of words. So, to some extent, it is possible to guess what the next letter or word might look like. And this is what is interesting about the Voynich manuscript. Its words do not look completely like random noise. They show statistical patterns that are similar to the way a real language behaves. In many words, it can also be seen that some letters appear more often at the beginning, some in the middle, and some at the end. In other words, it seems like there are certain rules working behind these words. This is exactly why some researchers believe that perhaps there really is a real language hidden inside this manuscript. But the biggest twist in the story is still left. Gordon Rugg's Cardan grill theory can also create similar language-like patterns through an artificial process. So, the same evidence can lead to two completely opposite conclusions. Either there is a real language behind these words, or some clever mechanical process has created the illusion of a language. So far, we have been talking about the words in the book and the patterns hidden inside them. But the story of this manuscript is not limited to what is written inside it. The journey of who owned it is also a mystery in itself. The name that appears as its earliest recorded owner is Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II. He ruled from 1576 to 1612. It is said that he bought this manuscript for 600 gold ducats because he believed that it had been written by the medieval English philosopher Roger Bacon. But there is a problem here too. There is no solid record of this purchase in Rudolph's royal accounts. The story of the 600 ducats comes from a letter written by a doctor from Prague, Johannes Marcus Marci, to the Roman Jesuit scholar Athanasius Kircher. So some historians consider it an old story or legend, rather than accepting it as completely true. After Rudolf, the manuscript went to his court pharmacist, and then came into the hands of an alchemist named Georg Baresch. Baresch also could not read it. Finally, in 1639, he asked Kircher for help in understanding it. After Baresch's death, the manuscript came to Marci, and then in 1665, Marci sent it to Kircher along with a famous letter. After that, the manuscript disappeared from public records for almost 2 centuries. Then, in 1912, the book suddenly appeared again. And this is where a new name enters the story, Wilfrid Voynich. In 1912, the Voynich Manuscript appeared once again. It was found and purchased by Polish book dealer Wilfrid Voynich inside a chest at the Jesuit college Villa Mondragone near Rome. But here too, the story is not completely clear. Some small inconsistencies have been pointed out between Voynich's own story of how he found the manuscript and the details later given by his wife. And this is what has led some people to a different suspicion. Some researchers have at one point considered the possibility that Wilfrid Voynich himself may have created the manuscript. According to this theory, sometime between 1900 and 1912, he could have used pieces of old, genuine vellum, drawn strange writing, and pictures on them himself, and then presented it as a mysterious ancient book in order to increase its value in the antique market. People who support this theory also point to some parts of Voynich's earlier life, such as his connection with fake passports and revolutionary activities. They believe this shows that Voynich was capable of doing such a thing. The handwriting throughout the manuscript also looks quite consistent, while many medieval manuscripts can contain writing from different scribes. But then we have the 2009 radiocarbon dating. The vellum turned out to date from between 1404 and 1438, meaning it was centuries older than Voynich himself. Yes, someone from a later period could have used old vellum, so this does not completely rule out every forgery theory. But it does make the question stronger. If this was a hoax, then how was it created in such a complicated way? So far, we have the AI indication toward Hebrew, but no proven translation. The proto-romance claim also failed to hold up. The Cardan grill can create language-like patterns, but its timeline does not match. And entropy tells us that the text does not look random, yet the same patterns could also be created through an artificial process. On top of that, there are also many gaps in the book's ownership history. So, the most honest answer today is this. We know that it is a mysterious book, but we do not know whether there is actually a language behind its words, a code, or a puzzle created by an extremely clever person. And perhaps this is the biggest mystery of the Voynich manuscript. It looks like a language when we read it, but to this day, no one has been able to prove whether there is actually a language behind it or not. If you like such deep and mysterious stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel.